Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of COVID Calls. I'm your host, Chris Peregin, and today we're going to be discussing the very sensitive topic of the humanitarian crisis that's taking place on the Mediterranean Sea as a result of some of the decisions that are being taken by governments, including the Maltese government, to close its ports. On today's program, we had wanted to have Foreign Minister Everett Bartolo. We invited him to the show. He was unable to make it today. Everett Bartolo has made a proposal which we will be analyzing in some detail today with a number of guests. Our guests today, in his absence, are Xandru Cassar, the I believe 18-year-old man who was protesting outside Castille this week to save migrants from drowning. We also have Nationalist MEP Roberta Metsola, who has just had an interesting meeting in Brussels, or well, I guess remotely, regarding the situation, and she will be updating us with some of the decisions the EU is taking. And we also have editor of Eyes of the Left, Raisa Galea, who is an academic and someone very interested in this space, and will also be giving her opinion on what's happening. And I just want to start off. Hi guys, first of all, welcome to the show, and thanks for being with us today. I just want to start with you, Xandru. First of all, thanks for being with us, and thanks for making your voice heard. Can we hear you? By the way, is the sound okay?
Fine.
Okay, perfect. So, Xandru, this week after Easter Sunday, you sat outside Castille in a sort of one-man protest. Why? What triggered this?
Biex ngħid il-verità għal-bidu x'kien bdiet l-affarijiet situazzjoni ta' bħalissa bdejt insegwi naqra l-aħbarijiet nara x'inhu jiġri ma jiġri rapporti li bdew jeħorġin. Jiena nħoss b'saħħti fuq daw l-affarijiet li daw l-ħajjiet tan-nies f'periklu. Bdejt nagħmel nista fuq il-medji soċjali bħalma jagħmel kwalunkwe persuna daqsi li jħoss fuq ċertu affarijiet. Bdejt nibgħat petitions li sħabi, nitkellem fuq l-affarijiet ma' sħabi ma' familti, nixxer l-artikli fuq il-medji soċjali u affarijiet hekk. Imma sfortunatament ħassejt li minkejja x-xogħol ta' ħafna NGOs, rappreżentanti u kelliema u figuri pubbliċi fuq l-affarijiet, il-pożizzjoni tal-gvern u l-istqarrija tal-gvern ma nbidlitx u daw in-nies baqgħu hemm, jiena ħassejt li il-pass li kien imiss kien li nagħmel hekk u għalhekk ħassejt li kien qudiem Kastilja nagħmel li għamilt.
U meta tlajt Kastilja, eżin xrid x'kellek f'moħħok li what was the sort of achievement you wanted to have, x'kien l-iskop, xrid bħala deċiżjonijiet mill-gvern?
To put it quite simply, it was for people to be safe, ma kien hemm l-ebda punt politiku speċifiku li rrid nara jsir. Lan kien sempliċement li daw in-nies ma jarqux, daw in-nies li kienu f'periklu imminenti li tilfu ħajjithom, ma setax ikun li daw in-nies imutu u jiena ħassejt li ma stajtx ma nagħmel xejn fuq hekk u għamilt li stajt. Sempliċement u hekk. L-aqwa li dawn in-nies jiddaħħlu x'imkien u jkunu siguri u ma jibqgħux fix-xkwi tal-mewt, sempliċi daqs.
Obviously, and also for those who are viewing us from around the world, I mean, Malta, just to give a bit of context, there was a boat in Malta search and rescue area, and the government had sort of stuck to its word essentially when it said, this was the last boat we're going to rescue. We're not going to rescue any more migrants. Now you've suspended that decision. But you've suspended your protest, right? You're home again. Why? Why did you suspend the protest?
Ekku għadniex Castille, I'm no longer in front of Castille. Jgħetlu f'dari, imma ma jfissirx li ovvjament ix-xogħol jaqfaw l-għan huwa li dawn in-nies jiddaħħlu port sigur u jkunu siguri ma jibqgħux fir-riskju imminenti tal-mewt, dak għadni nagħmel li nista' nikkoopera ma' min jixtieq koopera biex nagħmel jsir dan. Għalfejn ħad dik id-deċiżjoni iddeċidejt li l-messaġġ tiegħi ġie mifhum mill-awtorità responsabbli namely Roberta Metsola, Prim Ministru.
Għax kellek laqa miegħu x'hekk, x'kien il-laqa, ġifieri x'qallek fil-laqa?
Il-laqa tkellimt miegħu fuq diversi livelli u fuq diversi temi ovvjament relatati immedjatament ma' dak li qed jiġi bħalissa fuq dak li qed tipprotesta fuqu. Ma nixtieqx tidħol f'dettalji tal-li tqal u ma tqalx. Imma li ħareġ minn din il-laqa huwa jiena I was made to believe, I got the strong impression li il-Prim Ministru Roberta Metsola fhem dak li kienet jgħid, ħabb is-serjetà, a very open discussion, very frank. Imma tagħna l-impressjoni serja li ħabb is-serjetà dak li għadt, femna xulxin minn konna fejn ġejjin u li xi ħaġa kien ħajsir.
Imma ġara xi ħaġa ġifieri llum taħseb li ġara xi ħaġa taħseb li n-nies xorta qed jerqu x'hekk.
Ekku le, n-nies xorta qed jerqu għalhekk aħna infatti għadna naħdmu hekk, jiġri n-nies għadhom hemm. It hasn't been solved, jiġri we are not where we should be. Imma nibqa' bit-tama jiena wara dik it-taħdita mal-Prim Ministru li xi ħaġa ħajsir. Ma waqafniex hawn, jiġri ma jiena kellimt il-Prim Ministru daqshekk sejjer norqgħu transferixxi, jiġri jiena min irid tikellimni nkellmu nibqa' naħdem imma nħoss li ma kienx għalfejn nagħmel dan minn quddiem Castille.
U għajdilna ftit il-realtà li tkun quddiem Castille, you spent about 48 hours over there and you slept over there at night, you know, was it very cold, what was the difficulty you faced?
L-ewwel opportunità biex in-nies tara l-qalb tajba ta' nies li jgħidulk, I showed up with 0 supplies, I didn't even have water. But people immediately offered their help, brought food, supplies. I spent the night there, I spent the day there in the sun, but people showed up, brought basics like sunblock, food, water, drinks, and where many people were lending a hand out to offer help, however, whether it was mobile credit or food deliveries. Despite, it was hot during the day and cold during the night, a lot of people reached out, and I thank these people from here and keep thanking them for offering what they could.
Thank you very much. I want to bring in Roberta Metsola as well, who, Roberta, you just had a meeting, right, with some EU leaders. Tell us a bit about it.
Grazie. L-ewwel net, Chris, inti x'tixtieq li nitkellmu bl-Ingliż jew bil-Malti?
Kif trid għandna nies minn kull pajjiż qed jarawna, if you want to mix it up a bit and give us something in English and something Maltese as you wish.
All right. So l-ewwel nett Xandru nixtieq nirringrazzjak ta' dak li għamilt. Naħseb u rejtna s-saħħa tal-karattru Malti kemm verament nistgħu nkunu kburin pajjiżna għaliex nemmnu fil-valuri l-prinċipi li jaqduna. Naħseb huwa dak li għandu jispirana, dak li jispira lili għal fxiex tħalt fil-politika li dejjem nitlaq mill-prinċipju li l-ħajja ta' kulħadd hija l-iktar ħaġa importanti. U allura inti u rejtna f'dawn il-jiem għad-disid tista' tgħid ta' kemm verament il-valuri tagħna huma dak li nirrispettaw id-dritt tal-ħajja. As regards the meetings we just held, of course this is an ongoing debate, and I would have wanted and would have liked the Minister for Foreign Affairs after he gave a statement yesterday from which we were not allowed to ask any questions about his new unprompted proposal about Libya. This is a very serious debate we should have. This is where we don't talk, as the Minister said, as though we are from tiny Malta, but we should show really the strength of our character and how proud we are to be from a country where we have always helped out, we have always contributed, both on the national front, on an international level, because we have always been proud of where we are from and who we are. So with the European Commission, and there are debates going on now and also continuing tomorrow, we would like to put, of course, once again on the table the situation that Malta and other frontline member states are facing. It was clear, we were predicting that there would be, even during this very difficult time, but because it is at the same time as boats start to arrive, that this would coincide with the COVID-19 pandemic. We have been asking the government to be well prepared, and what we believe is that the government was not at all prepared. We have been receiving conflicting signals. Prime Minister says one thing, the Minister says something. If you think about what Evers Bartolo said yesterday and what he said in 2018, where he had appealed to the government to save human lives. So once we depart from the principle that our obligation is to save human lives, then we can start to discuss how we're going to protect the health of everyone, how we're going to make sure that countries like Malta are not left alone, how we're going to ensure that operations out at sea, whether if they are border control or rescue operations, or helping the Libyan Coast Guard to actually put the vessels of its own Coast Guard on the water, as was not happening until a few years ago, how to address the valid, yes, security concerns.
But what is the EU doing? So
that Malta is not alone in facing this challenge. And this is our message, and we do it because we are at the table. Europe bashing is not going to get us anywhere. We fought to join the European Union against, yes, people including Evers Bartolo and his Eurosceptic
wait
colleagues,
a second, before we get
in
into
order
the
to be able to get on the table to discuss issues, because if we're not in the EU, we would be having to face this challenge alone. And it is the fact that we are a member of the EU that we can dedicate funds, that we can adopt legislation that addresses our challenges, that we can show to all the other member states that we are willing to observe our responsibility in return for our rights to be shared and our challenges to be shared.
But let me ask you the question, if I can. What is going to be the EU response to two things? One is the Prime Minister's decision to close the ports, and two is Evers Bartolo's proposal to give 100 million euros to Libya. On those 2 points, let's start with the decision to close the ports. What is the EU response that you're receiving?
Well, first of all, you need to see what Malta's international obligations are. Malta has always upheld those international obligations, which means that if there are boats in distress, our obligation is not because we are an EU member, but because we are signatory to international conventions. We were signatory before we joined the EU, and we continue, like every other member state, to be signatory to those conventions. Libya is not signatory to those same conventions. It's important to keep this in mind when we discuss how to go ahead with Libya. Now, on the closure of the ports, member states, other member states, Roberta Bella's socialist partners, let's remind ourselves that when we talk about champagne socialists pretending or suddenly becoming far-right apologists, that they are members of a socialist family that has been insisting on humanitarian solutions to this very, very big challenge that we have. So those are the questions that have been asked over the past few days and will continue to be asked also from the very highest levels. There is a legislative package on the table that will be adopted in the next few weeks, and that precisely will do what we have failed with a lot of frustration to do so far, is to move from the so-called flexible solidarity, where other member states can simply say, this has nothing to do with me because I'm far away from the Mediterranean, to actually being obliged to help, not only financially, but also with persons who would have been granted protection to be spread around the European Union. So far, you're not being very frustrating.
Sorry for stopping you, but I don't feel you're being very concrete over here, in the sense that we've got boats at sea, people at sea who are presumed drowning or presumed going to drown, and are we just gonna sort of watch that happen? Is there something that is there some intervention? Is Malta going to be allowed to do this?
Well, I think, first of all, Partit Nazzjonalista has been extremely clear from the very beginning that this crisis started, right? That we have to show our humanitarian nature and save lives. We cannot let these people drown. When we say all lives matter, we mean all lives matter. When we say,
but they are drowning,
right? When we're looking at vulnerable persons, well, we have received reports. The government has not yet denied that there was a sabotaging or whatever it said of the equipment on a boat. We have received appeals from persons who are in contact with the persons on those boats. We're talking about four vessels, around 250 persons. We know that there are reports of vulnerable persons, children, pregnant women. This is a reality. Now, what is the government going to do? The Nationalist Party has been very clear. Look, all human lives matter. Save those people who are in distress. This does not mean, as we have heard from also medical personnel, that you let them loose when they arrive at shore. No, if we can do what has happened already in Italy, that you bring boats to shore, you put them immediately in quarantine, you make sure that the health concerns that are justified are addressed, and therefore they are kept in a safe place. What we have to I think what we have to guarantee is the safety of those people. Now, what we have also said as Partit Nazjonalista is that the current health crisis, and I'm not even going to go into the original scandal with St. Luke's, Konrad Mizzi still being a minister. I will leave that for another program. But what we have heard also from the medical sector is that the crisis that we are facing and the challenges that we are facing would not justify letting these people drown. And I think it is that statement that we have to go by when understanding that our obligations also mean that if there are people drowning in our waters, we save them.
Okay, I just want to bring in Raisa Galea as well into this discussion. Raisa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So first of all, I want to get your reaction to what Roberta has been saying as well, in terms of, okay, we need to save these people. Italy has also closed its ports, but has found a way of kind of still protecting human life. What do you make of the government's decision to close its ports, and do you think there's a justification there in terms of the COVID-19 crisis?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Xandru. I mean, you're my hero, like for today and for the rest of the year, for sure. Like you're the guy. Like be like Xandru. So regarding this standoff and the closure of ports, I feel that we have some kind of amnesia, because this is at least the fourth case that I can recall, and the three other cases were not connected to COVID pandemic anyhow. So I recall 2 years ago, June 2018, boat called Aquarius, which had around 200, well, I do not remember exactly, but a few hundred people on board. Then we had more than 2 weeks, if I remember well, I think around 19 days standoff, another standoff December 2018, January 2019. And
so do you think this is an excuse?
So I'm just trying to recall these cases. So we had Sea-Watch 3, yes, which and we had all these arguments. We're a Christian country, and it's Christmas time, and people are drowning, etc., etc. And we had exactly almost a year ago, exactly, Alan Kurdi in April last year. So those cases were when the boats were refused disembarkation for at least 2 weeks, when there was no COVID pandemic in sight. So I do think that is an excuse, because if health was really such an important matter, we would have no hunting, we would have no construction going on, we would probably have a lockdown, I suppose, if it really was such a case. So I do think that is a I do not believe.
So are you saying that on other issues the government is willing to make compromises on health, but yes, on the issue of migration, it's using this as
these issues are very like they are not exactly instances kind of which are not connected. They are connected because the government, in fact, makes sure that it defends national identity and national pride. And even Roberta said, like, we need to show our values, and we need to show that we are proud citizens. So what are we defending here? National pride or lives? Because I'm very much afraid that national pride was always government's top concern, that we are our people and our country, and how we should not let the EU bend it about. And actually, and another thing, what I still cannot understand, when Sea-Watch 3 was held like in rough weather in winter in January 2019, Joseph Muscat signed a few agreements with the EU, and from then like a large portion of migrants which were saved and brought to Malta were relocated. In fact, he constantly mentioned it. And in fact, Matteo Renzi, in January 2019, said this is a man who saved European migration crisis, la la la. So Joseph Muscat was beating himself on the chest regularly. Regarding PN being so keen on saving lives, I'm not convinced either. In October, if I remember correctly, last year, when there was another boat which was refused disembarkation, Adrian Delia and was in fact attacking Joseph Muscat, saying, but you are filling up the country with foreigners. And Joseph Muscat, which is really weird because it's something unlikely for him, said, but shall we save them or shall we let them drown? So we are going in circles, in rounds. This is a tired debate. It seems that the solution has been already found because the migrants who are brought, like 350 migrants which were brought from the Ocean Viking, 150 of them were relocated to France. So this idea that somehow Malta is left alone to face the burden are bullshit. I'm sorry. I mean, it's not true.
Raisa, if I could just ask you a question and then bring it to the rest of the panel as well. Everest Bartola has made this proposal for the EU to give 100 million euros to Libya to sort of manage the crisis itself, and keep the refugees, the would-be refugees, in some sort of humanitarian support. What do you make of that proposal?
Well, I mean, if we kind of peel off all the niceness attached to it, that because the way they wrapped it is that we want to punish and deter traffickers, and that's the NGOs who traffic people. So they worded it as though they are concerned about people who migrate, which is not true, because people do not risk their lives for nothing. So basically, I believe 100 million is a large sum, and why not to actually invest this large sum in Europe? So actually have migrant accommodation in Europe. So I mean, why give 100 million to Libya, which might not use it? And I mean, how will they keep them in camp?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to get Roberta's opinion as well, but I would like to get Xandru's first as well, and so you can also respond to both of them. Roberta, Xandru, when you had this proposal, I don't know if this is something that Roberta Bella mentioned to you in your meeting, but do you think that this is an adequate proposal? Do you think this is, I don't know, coming from a place of guilt even?
Realistically, the issue right now is that there are people in imminent danger at sea at this present moment. This is a proposal which will treat a long-term issue, hopefully, and address this long-term issue and make things better. But the instance we have to focus on at the moment is the matter on our hands as a country is that there are people at sea going to die now, lacking basic resources, lacking water, lacking food, lacking fuel. This is not a proposal that deals with this issue. My protest is not about this broader issue. The issue at the moment, what Maltese government should be worried about, and what we all should be worried about, is that these people are going to die any second now. They could die any second now. And that has not been addressed in this proposal. So there's, for me at least, the issue of these people at sea at the moment has not been addressed.
Okay. Roberta, what do you make of this proposal?
First of all, I think you should also ask different ministers in Roberta Bella's cabinet what they think of this proposal. So far, we have seen one-liners, headlines, trying to occupy the media with proposals that are not costed and not based in fact. So it hurts me to see the Minister for Education say that closing our port was unfortunate but necessary. I mean, unfortunate is losing a football game, not letting people drown. It pains me to see a parliamentary secretary putting a plaque for the anniversary of the unfortunate tragic death of Lassana, and then complete silence when there is a tragedy about to happen outside our shores. It pains me to see that we quote the Pope on everything except when he talks about migrants outside our shores. Now, this is where I come back to where the point of departure is, that everything we do, whether we are political leaders, and we have a particular responsibility in what we say and how we participate in this debate and how we listen to people, to you, Xandru, to you, Raisa, in what you expect us political leaders, politicians to do, because we need to understand where we want to go, but we can never forget where we came from and what our fundamental principles are. Now, on the Libya point and the Libya proposal, first of all, what are the costings of this? Who is going to pay this 100 million euro? Why is Malta and the minister talking about tiny Malta in a tweet, and then it's almost like, okay, if you don't give that money, we are going to let people drown. I mean, what kind of irresponsible language are we having from our supposed political leaders? We have seen this happen before by other third country leaders, and they failed. This kind of brinksmanship, this Erdogan style. You don't give me what I want, I will let all the immigrants flood your shores. But we are European for a reason, because we really have those values that, unfortunately, yes, current Libyan leaders have not signed up to. So when we talk about that 100 million, and it's a small amount, Raisa, for Libya, it's a huge country with a 20-year problem where we have already operations, yes, to combat smugglers, because these smugglers target the most vulnerable. They traffic women and children. We have a big problem in that regard. But we also need to show responsibility as a European Union when we deal with third countries. So what is Everest doing? How, on the one hand, is he talking about a politically neutral country like we are? What are we going to do? Who is going to have that money? The political leadership, or the lack of it in Libya, is enough to make us completely skeptical of any proposal. And the amount is a pittance when compared to what Libya would need to overcome a 20-year conflict, a civil war, massive poverty, and frankly, fundamental and tragic abuse of the fundamental rights of every single person on its land. So these are the questions that I would have liked the minister to answer, but I think you also, Chris, should ask every single minister, and also the members of the European Parliament who were elected with me last year, who form part of the socialist group, and ask them, do you believe that what your government is doing is in line with the principles that you profess to have?
Okay, Roberta, thanks for that. But also, we must also ask the question, you know, is Europe, is European solidarity something real? Because there's also the European values, right, of not leaving a country like Malta to deal with this alone. And you know, maybe it's silly to refer to ourselves as tiny Malta, but we are on the front line of this crisis. And so far, you know, no matter how much you know, pressure is put, nothing seems to change in terms of the European solidarity. And I also want to kind of reflect a bit some of the sentiment. I mean, like I said, I would have loved to have the minister or someone from the government side to defend this position, but I would also like to challenge your perspective as well. I mean, there was a time when we had this debate about, you know, how many foreign workers and third country nationals we need in Malta to prop up our economy and keep the economic boom going. That's changed radically now, right? And we're probably going to see mass unemployment as a result of COVID-19. There's going to be a lot of people unemployed who are already in Malta, and in Europe in general. You know, is there going to be, you know, is this less sustainable than it's ever been in terms of how many migrants can be brought to Europe and Malta specifically? So on European solidarity and on the economic realities of migration.
Look, let's start on the solidarity. Absolutely. We have been, let's say, at the forefront of this, let's call it an argument, if not a fight, since we joined the European Union. There were times when Malta, under Prime Minister Gonzi's premiership, where sometimes we would have thousands arriving on our shores with a very, very unhelpful opposition led by Joseph Muscat at the time. But there you had tangible examples of solidarity shown by countries like Germany, by France at the time, by Luxembourg, I remember the UK also, saying, look, Malta is not alone, we are going to help. Was it enough? Absolutely not. Would I have expected us to have laws in place and not just bilateral ad hoc agreements? We had a chance to do it during the presidency. We failed in 2017. We could have, at the time, adopted legislation that would have made sure that the persons coming in who are eligible for protection would be able to be relocated to other member states. Are we still in time? Absolutely. In the next few weeks, as I just said, there will be a new pact for migration, which will be on the table, no longer with flexible solidarity, better return. And here I will talk about, here is my political group saying, look, we need to be more efficient with our returns, because we are currently with a very, very inefficient system where only 36% approximately of people against whom a decision for protection is denied, and therefore they will have to be returned. But there, the European Union is still very far away. But again, we would need third countries to come on board with us. There is a lot to be done, and we are proposing both immediate, medium-term and longer-term solutions. All can be done. We are still in the beginning of our mandate with a new commission, and there is willingness, of course, that we would have been able to adopt this before the pandemic, but now everything has to be done also in that context. As regards the third country national workers, again, these are people who would be brought in with a work permit, depending on the availability of the market. But again, my party, and we had asked the question, what is the economic vision of the government in bringing in thousands and thousands of persons to fill in jobs? What if those jobs no longer exist? Only now is the government responding, because before, Joseph Muscat would try to taunt by saying, don't worry, he'll pay your pensions, or don't worry, what do you expect them to? What do you expect Maltese people to sweep the streets? This was the language that we had to live with under Joseph Muscat. And now we have Roberta Metsola, who cannot take a decision, who says something and says the complete opposite the next day. We need real leadership on this. We need responsibility to be shown by our political leaders. And on this, we have to be, first of all, extremely careful in the language we use. Unfortunate but necessary is absolutely unacceptable from the Minister for Education, who should be giving us an example as to how, as he calls himself, a progressive socialist should behave. And also, we need to make sure that our economic policies are grounded in a proper economic vision. Where do we want to go?
So what would you do?
Yeah.
I'm going to bring you in, Raisa. I know you're dying to say something. But Roberta, if you were in charge, very briefly, if you were in charge, if you were in the shoes of Roberta Metsola, what would you do today? Let the migrant boats in?
I would save everybody whose life is at risk. Okay. And I would not stamp my feet and say I'm too tiny to actually save lives.
Raisa, what do you make of the economic realities around this? I know you're obviously very interested even in issues like universal basic income and the economic changes that you wish to see. You must be also quite heartbroken about Bernie getting out of the race in the US. But I want to know, like, how are you envisaging things developing in Malta now that unemployment is going to become a big reality? And I imagine the sentiment. I mean, we're seeing some of the comments coming in here. Like the sentiment is aggressively anti-immigration. In many ways, and I'm sure I'll ask Xandru soon about the kind of reactions he got to his protest. Isn't this just going to continue unless something is done, essentially?
Well, I mean, there are a few points that you've touched upon already, and regarding the comments. Well, we know that. I mean, we know that many in Malta are aggressively nationalistic, I would say, not in the sense of the PN, but nationalistic, that this is our country and we are being invaded and we need to be saved and blah 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 blah. So and if you remember, a few weeks before we had the first confirmed positive COVID case, Neville Gaffar testified in the public inquiry, and tomorrow is two and a half years since Daphne Caruana Galizia was killed, and he said that, you know, I stopped thousands of migrants from coming to Malta, and I averted the national crisis. And you could see from the reaction that, like, he was absolved from everything. It's like, so what? He was the right-hand man of one of the suspects. It was like, so what? You know, he saved the country. So this is kind of rhetoric. It is our country. It is our value. We must save it. And I think this is, in fact, fundamentally unhelpful. So if we want to focus on solidarity, we must understand that in 50 years, perhaps, due to climate change, Malta will be unlivable, and probably everyone in Malta will have to relocate elsewhere. So we cannot even keep this rhetoric going with national borders, with nations, blah 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 blah. We need to understand that internationalism and international solidarity is the only way. And in terms of the economy, indeed, I mean, underpaid migrant workers were the motor behind GDP boom. Indeed, and as soon as you know, we've entered this COVID crisis, they were just, you know, just discarded as garbage, and their children continuously face threats of being deported. So this idea that people are just tools that we can use, and then when we no longer need them, you know, they can just go elsewhere, it's also entirely unhelpful. We know that in the past 5 years of tremendous economic growth, a lot of companies made a lot of money. So why not impose, say, a 45% tax on them over the past years, and we will have perhaps enough funds to even have UBI going. And another thing, we know, for example, this pandemic, who are the most important people running our society? It's not us working from home, but people who actually swipe the streets, nurses, delivery workers. So if we, in fact, have job guarantee for people in this sector, so we know that this sector should be paid better, because people, in fact, face health risks now.
Yeah, like health workers. Yeah, I just want to bring in because
we can restructure the economy around that issue. Well, I'm not an economist, so I would leave it to others, but I still believe that solution can be found.
Thank you very, very much. We're running out of time. I want to get Xandru's perspective on the economic realities as well. Xandru, you're studying agricultural economy, right? If I'm not mistaken. Did I say that correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yes, economics, yes. But to be frank, palissa, these last two interventions, palissa mhux waqt li nitkellmu fuq ekonomija, fuq miżuri fil-futur, fuq il-bidla fil-klima, fuq 50 sena oħra, ma konċerni validi, imma issa huwa l-waqt li narfu li bħalissa dal-mument issa binaw ftit minut oħra jista' jkun l-inbijiet ta' nies imutu issa. Din hija xi ħaġa li ma nistgħux ninsew brand bl-Inglis ngħidu put on the back burner. Il-priorità bħalissa huwa li naraw dawn in-nies ikunu f'post li mhux ħajmutu b'mod sigur. Ma jistax ikun li id-dibattitu immexxuh bħalissa f'dan mument fuq il-miżuri ekonomiċi ħajsiru minħabba l-coronavirus, ħabba l-immunità. Bħalissa dawn in-nies ħajmutu. Importanti li ma nitilfux il-perspettiva li jiena għamilt li għamilt u qiegħed nitkellem magħkom preċiżament ħabbek għax dawn in-nies ħajmutu issa. It's imminent. We cannot talk about 5 years ago or 50 years time or anything of this sort. Issa jrid naraw kull min jista' jagħmel xi ħaġa, irid jagħmel minn kollox jista'. Jekk huwa jemmenek u jiena nemmenek u għalhekk ngħid ma nistgħux nitilfu l-perspettiva, issa huwa l-waqt naġixxu fuq in-nies li ħajmutu minn hawn ftit sigħat oħra. Ma jistax ikun li nitilfu il-mira tagħna, l-fokus tagħna u nitilfu fuq affarijiet oħra għax inkella dawn in-nies ħajsofru mhux bil-flus ekonomikament, jew bħajjithom ħajsofru daw. Il-ħlas ikun il-ħajja in-nies.
U l-Prim Ministru x'qallek biex konvinċik biex twaqqaf il-protesta tiegħek?
Il-Prim Ministru ma
ħajsalbhom jew le?
Il-Prim Ministru ma xejn biex ikkonvinċini biex nieqaf il-protesta tiegħi. Jiena ma talabniex nieqaf, ma nagħmel l-ebda minn dan it-tip. Jiena deċiżjoni għamilta minn naħa tiegħi. Ħatta jiena għax ħadd id-deċiżjoni li mindu qalli tani gave me the impression, honest impression I would say, I trust him li something will happen. Għarrafni għalli tisma minn għandu. U jiena ħadd il-kelma tiegħu and I trust that something will be done. Sakemm isir dan ovvjament nkompli, but that is what I keep awaiting. U palma qatt l-istarrija tiegħi l-bira fil-għaxija, nibqa' nistenna. Flimkien ma' poplu Malti kolli u flimkien iktar ma daw in-nies nofs il-baħar xina nistenna hawnhekk ma ġara xejn daw in-nies li m'għandhomx bżonnijiet bażiċi fix-xemx fil-bart jien għamilt lejl wieħed. Daw ilhom il-ġranet kważi minn il-ġimgħat. Dawn in-nies li għandhom bżonn jisimgħu għand il-Prim Ministru mhux jiena.
Grazzi ħafna tas-servizz tiegħek u tal-protesta tiegħek u tal-kliem tiegħek li naħseb ċari ħafna. I want to wrap up the program, and I want to just get a last comment from Roberta in terms of what Xandru has just said specifically, and whether you expect any change in policy from the government given these realities. Do you think that Roberta is going to change his mind, or do you think that's wishful thinking at this point?
I think real leadership would lead to saving lives. We save lives now, as Xandru said, we negotiate later. We understand there are concerns, we will answer all the questions, but ultimately, if there are people at risk of losing their lives, it is our humane responsibility as Christians, as persons who value life, to save them.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you, Raisa. Thank you, Xandru. And thank you for everybody who is watching as well and leaving your comments. So that was another edition of COVID Calls. I think the biggest takeaway message is the one that Xandru said. You know, we could discuss forever about the realities around the humanitarian crisis, you know, whether Libya is doing its bit, whether the European Union is doing its bit, whether, you know, how COVID is affecting all of this, how we one day will end up refugees ourselves due to climate change. But the bottom line is that there are boats out there with men, women, children, pregnant women, you know, babies, and at the moment the world is sort of barely watching and letting them drown, you know. So I think that's a very powerful message to close with. I just want to also let you know that tomorrow on COVID Calls at 11 a.m. we will also have the Health Minister Chris Peregin, or Deputy Prime Minister Chris Peregin on the show. So if you have any questions for him, please list them and tune in tomorrow at 11. I was your host Chris Peregin, and this was COVID Calls, and thanks again for watching.